So much to get into from during the week, and obviously in all in the context of the Manchester Derby at the weekend. A game, Daniel, that it strikes me, it's almost the biggest indictment of both of these teams, that I suspect both will be happy to leave it on Saturday evening with a point apiece.
I'm not sure about that. I think that United definitely need to not get beaten. City probably could do with a win, and I think City will want to win, but it's definitely true that both sides have had problems this season.
Yeah. We were chatting to Andy Minton during the week, and he was, or a few weeks ago I should say, and he was talking about the fact that at that time United weren't even considering, is what he said, sacking Ole Gunnar Solskjær, and obviously they've had their difficulties now in the Champions League during the week, and indeed before that. Is it your understanding that's still the case, or have events over the last 10 days or thereabouts shifted that notion?
When I say my understanding, I don't mean Daniel Harris understands, like someone has informed me. So I'm guessing, but things had to get much, much worse with David Moyes, Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho before they got fired. Things at the moment are nowhere near as bad as that, because what's happened is, in my opinion anyway, is that Ole has built a much better team than any of those three managed to do. So he might not be a team that is able to take the next step under him. And I would say, as a writer and as a United supporter, it's hard not to wonder what this team might do with the best available manager, even though the journey from where United were when Solskjær took over to where they are now has actually been a pretty decent one, in that he inherited an absolute mess, and he's now put together a team that on a good day can beat pretty much anyone. But it appears now that we're trapped in a cycle of good performances and bad performances, and there's a struggle to find any consistency of selection, any consistency of style, and I think that is affecting style of performance. But again, as I said at the beginning, things had to get much, much worse before any of the other managers got sacked. It basically took the players tossing it off, and it doesn't look like that's likely to happen in the near to in the near future.
Yeah, I'm looking at your Twitter feed. I think you're not convinced that it's all necessarily Solskjær's fault either, that even though maybe the systems aren't right or the tactics aren't right or maybe the team selections aren't right, the players have to take a chunk of this responsibility as well.
I mean, that'll be the case with almost anything. Like where there's a blame, in any kind of situation, it's usually the case that there are lots of people involved. And United, and we always come back to this, so it starts from the top, it starts from the Glazers, it starts from Ed Woodward. But there comes to a point where, first of all, the manager has to, not to accept that this is how things are, but this is how things are, and he needs to make the best of that. And then the players need to make the best of whatever tactics and personnel the manager bestows upon them. So I thought it was quite clear from before the game that Ole had picked the wrong team and absolutely the wrong formation, but that doesn't absolve his defenders of the need to perform basic defending. It doesn't absolve his midfielders of the need to follow runners, to put themselves in positions where they can win the ball. And the funny thing is dreadful though United were, if Greenwood and Rashford had played well, United would be through now. And so it's rare that you have a situation, well, not that rare for United in the post-Fergie wilderness years, TM, where everyone gets everything wrong. But Tuesday was one of those special nights where everyone who could do anything did it wrong. And in some ways, you can always take hope in the fact that United still almost pulled it off. But ultimately, there's frustration there, because this team should be better than that. And there is a good team in there. And for whatever reason, they're struggling to find it on a regular basis.
Daniel, you mentioned clearly players players have to take some of the blame when performances have been as they have been in the odd game for United recently. But is there a point that some of Solskjær's substitutions, particularly in the last couple of games, and in the case of Fred against PSG, a lack of substitution? I mean, to see Axel Tuanzebe and Tim Fosu-Mensah come off the bench the other day when United needed goals. I think Telles was taken off at half-time, and then Shaw not too long after into the second half. Some of the substitutions Solskjær has been making recently have been head-scratchers, to say the least. Does he not have to take a fair share of the blame here?
Absolutely. As I said, there's lots of blame to go around, and there's no need to be sparing. If I was looking at the things Solskjær had done wrong, substitutions wouldn't be where I'd start, because, I mean, first of all, you'd have to point out that he made match-changing substitutions at half-time in the last two league games. Now, you could be arguing about the fact that he shouldn't have to, but he did make really good changes, good proactive attacking changes against Southampton and West Ham. So you'd have to mention that. He should have taken Fred off. I know why he didn't, but ultimately, yeah, it was only Fred. It's not Roy Keane, is it? And he had options on the bench. So, yeah, that was a mistake. United might still have lost because to PSG, because one of the things is that United's finishing is not good enough. There's no one who, I mean, Cavani perhaps is the only one who's taken all the chances that he should have done. And the other thing that United are making a mess of when we talk about that is not just that they're missing chances, they're also wasting really good situations. And that happened quite a lot against Leipzig, where just the decision-making was off. So if I was starting with things to blame Ole for, I probably wouldn't start with the substitutions, but it is fair to say that his substitutions against Leipzig were absolutely baffling, and I'm still baffled by them now.
The story, I guess, that has been one of the stories of the week, unfortunately, from United's perspective, has been Paul Pogba, and particularly his agent, Mino Raiola, and the timing of him coming out saying Pogba's future was far from certain at United and that he would likely leave in January was no coincidence, you'd have to say. What was your reaction to that? And secondly, Solskjær's reaction to that? I mean, United fans sometimes give out that Solskjær, he's all smiles when they lose games. He doesn't come out strong enough to things like this, for example, in press conferences, where he should perhaps stick the boot in to agents that are saying things at the wrong times. But what was your reaction to Mino Raiola's comments and then to Solskjær's reaction?
I thought that, I mean, his reaction in terms of the press conference, I'm not too fussed about that. I felt like in terms of what he actually did about it, he probably fell between two stools, because to me, he only had two options. One was to carry on like nothing had happened, in which case I would have expected to see Pogba play against Leipzig, given the fact that Fred wasn't available, or to just leave him out completely, which I think is probably what I would have done, partly because ultimately it's not my job on the line, so it's easy for me to take stances on principle. But I felt like a lot of the abuse that Paul Pogba and a lot of the stick Paul Pogba gets is unfair, and it's also fair to say that United have probably let him down, and that the things I'm sure that Edward had promised him when he took over, and the money that would be spent building a team that would be suitable, and there'll be other players with him of equivalent ability, I'm sure those promises were made and they weren't fulfilled. Other hand, Paul Pogba hasn't even come close to delivering what he should deliver. So I can see why people on both sides are aggravated. But for Paul Pogba to allow his agent to say the thing that he said before the biggest game of the season is, I don't like to say it, but it's treacherous. And the reason why I say it's treacherous is because it's working against the interests of the team. Now, I don't think that if any kind of player, however much they're paid, wants to play for a different club to the one they're at, then there should be people trying to stop that from happening. Because the fact that you're well rewarded and you're doing a job that everyone would love to have doesn't mean that you don't have the right to sell your labour wherever you would like to sell it. So if Paul Pogba wants to leave United, I think United should facilitate that. And the reality, I think, is that Ole would have happily sold Pogba the summer before last, except no one wanted him. So, or at least no one wanted to pay the amount of money that it would take to buy him. So what it looks like is happening here is Mino Raiola knows that Pogba wants out of United, probably knows that United would be happy to shift Pogba as well. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to make Pogba's position untenable, so that in a post-Corona world where no one's got any money, so there's no one's got even less money for someone like Paul Pogba, who is a brilliant talent but ultimately unreliable, then he needs to drive that price down. And also in a post-Bruno Fernandes world where people can now see what an elite level midfielder is supposed to contribute in terms of goals, in terms of personality, in terms of leadership, in terms of anything you would like to see in a big signing. That is Bruno Fernandes, and the distinction between him and Paul Pogba is unfortunately quite stark, and it's not particularly a distinction of ability either. So I can see why Mino Raiola did what he did, because it doesn't work for United. He works for Pogba, but that doesn't mean Pogba doesn't have a responsibility to do everything possible to advance the cause of Manchester United while he's a player there. And what he did in terms of disturbing the equilibrium of the team before a huge game was insubordinate. And I don't really see that you can argue it any other way. And Mino Raiola will know it was insubordinate, and he doesn't care. And you understand exactly why he doesn't care. But Pogba should still care, because he's still paid by United, so he still has a responsibility to United, and he's still training with those lads and playing with those lads every day, and they should all be able to rely on each other, that everyone's working for the team. And what Paul Pogba did, what Paul Pogba allowed his agent to do, was to work against the team. And as a manager, I don't really see that you can have that.
Yeah, I think that everybody would have to agree that Solskjær looks weak out of this. The perception of it is hugely important, and that's the way it looks. We don't also know what's going on in the background. Maybe he's been asked by the chief executive of the club or the board to not go so crazy in his, with his, maybe, I'm sure that Solskjær is that, like the rest of us, looking at this entire situation and going, this needs to be resolved, and this guy is not the player that we expected him to be, and he might be toning down his response in that way because obviously he's trying to protect the fee for him. There was one thing that I wanted to ask you, like there's a bit of a fatigue, right, with both of these topics, but they, as you said at the top, they limp on from week to week. One thing that caught my interest yesterday was Miguel Delaney, the football writer, saying that and I hadn't heard it anywhere else, but that a possible switch for Ronaldo with Juve might actually be something that's on the cards, that Juve might be open to this. I find it incredible, Daniel, that a player who at 27 should be in the peak of his powers there, and I don't know what any make weight would be here. Would there be a fee that would be attached to one or the other? I'm not 100% sure, but let's say it was a straight swap with a player who's going to be 36, I think, in the not too distant future. Have we lost Daniel?
No, I'm still here.
You're still there. A player who turns 36 in the not too distant future, it'd be an incredible thing. Is it likely? Is it? How do you think a deal like that might look?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I can't say whether it's likely. Seems a bit strange, I guess, because I mean, it seems strange partly because swap deals very rarely happen because so many moving parts, and so like any transfer deal not any transfer deal, but transfer deals can sometimes be difficult because there's lots of people that need to be happy: the buying club, the selling club, the agents, the players. So doing that with two players is definitely problematic. I have heard that Ronaldo is going to leave Juventus. I would be part of me would be surprised if United went back to that kind of Alexis Sanchez style of buying someone, and I don't even know where Ronaldo would go. On the other hand, United want rid of Pogba, so to take on Ronaldo's wages for, say, 2 more years, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, would seem like some sort of punt. But if you're trying to build a team, I'm not really sure how someone who's that age and so far over the hill, I don't really see why that would happen. And I would also say that there are probably moral grounds not to want to sign Cristiano Ronaldo as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable argument that people can do a very quick Google of and get all the details on it. Just finally, before we let you go, the Manchester derby, obviously the weekend, whether Pogba starts or not remains to be seen. And obviously United have good record against City of late. You would almost think that City have surely been looking at that, surely looking at what Leipzig did during the season, and surely have enough about them to beat United tomorrow night.
Not sure. I mean, United probably are not in a good place at the moment. So if you looked at it like that, then you definitely say City are favourites. But United when they play really well are a good team, and they're a good enough team to beat City. This City team they've still got some really good players, but they're between teams. They're like Guardiola's great team is finished. He's still got some of the players, and of course they're still good, but he's still busy integrating the players that he's trying to integrate in order to build his new team. They're dodgy at the back. Ferran Torres looks like a really good buy, but De Bruyne is slightly in and out now. And I would say that Raheem Sterling also has not been as consistent as he has been. They never really replaced Leroy Sané. They haven't really replaced Vincent Kompany. They haven't really replaced David Silva. So it's not like you would look at that City team and think, where is the weakness? How are we going to get at them? They don't keep the ball as well either. And it was always the keeping of the ball that protected a dodgy defence. And they find that much harder to do. Whereas United, if Ole gets the team right, have got firepower, they've got loads of goals, they've got legs in attack. They're also no good at the back. But it's not the mismatch that it has been in previous years, and we've seen that because United have won the last 3 derbies. Now, one of those was a robbery. The robbery in the second leg of the League Cup last season was an absolute robbery, but it was also before Bruno Fernandes. Whereas the game after Bruno Fernandes, once Bruno Fernandes had signed, United won that game 2-0, won it quite comfortably. Really, they had to do a lot of defending, but they didn't have to defend a lot of chances. I think what will be interesting to see is what Ole decides to do, because I would say, we've said this before, that there are performances United have put in this season that demand not just, well, let's see what happens next time, but consequences. And I felt that David De Gea should have been dropped after the Spurs game, because even though he wasn't totally responsible in a massively culpable way for any of the 6 goals, he did concede 6 goals, and that does suggest a defence that isn't properly organised. Also, if you have a manager whose brief is to build a team, David De Gea is not going to be part of that because he's miles past his best, and it just seems unlikely that he's going to get it back because this down period that he's in has been going on not even for a year, but for 2 years. United really should have moved on from De Gea when he was making mistakes that cost them getting into the Champions League, not this Champions League, but the one before. So I think that Dean Henderson will come in. I hope Dean Henderson will come in. And I think that the defence playing behind a goalkeeper who they know is going to talk to them, who they know is going to come and collect crosses, might make quite a difference. Not that it absolves Aaron Wan-Bissaka of his seeming inability to look over his shoulder or to look in the air when the ball's passing over his head, but I do think that'll make a difference. And I think that United do have a decent chance, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if United won, but I also wouldn't be surprised if United got a gubbing because that is the nature of this team. It's a bit like Ron Atkinson's team in the 80s where they're capable of beating anyone on a good day and their good players are really good and their top level is a really high level, but they're also capable of getting absolutely gubbed if they come across a good team on a bad day.
Daniel, just on David De Gea, since you've brought him up, and I know Dean Henderson has played quite well when he's been called on. He played pretty well in the win at West Ham. Paul Scholes was quite scathing against David De Gea after the game midweek, saying he almost pulled out of the third goal for Leipzig when Justin Kluivert scored. Has some of the rhetoric been around David De Gea been a little bit harsh? That maybe, look, Dean Henderson has come in a couple of games and been good, but De Gea has been a loyal servant to United and he has shown glimpses, albeit, as you said, he may be past his best. But has some of the rhetoric around David De Gea been a tad harsh?
I don't think so. David De Gea has been costing United goals for quite a long time now, and the stuff that he's done in the past is not really relevant to the goalkeeper that he is now. Like him being good in 2013 I'm very pleased that he, as a United supporter, that he was good in 2013, but it's now nearly 2021, and he hasn't been good for 2 years. And I don't know if he's been training as hard. I read somewhere recently that he's been training a bit harder since Henderson turned up, but I'd also heard that his training is not what it should be. But even if we put that to one side, you look at you judge by your performances. And I agree with Paul Scholes. I think he did bottle coming for that cross. I don't think he wanted to come for it. And that's not for me. That's not me saying that I don't understand that goalkeeping is hard, that you get hurt, but that's part of the job. And I think that the thing about Dean Henderson, who I don't know how good he is as a goalkeeper. I think he's a good keeper. I'm not sure he's a brilliant keeper. I'm not sure his best will ever be as good as David De Gea's. But ultimately, if your goalkeeper isn't throwing in anything, then that is a good starting point. If the defence are confident playing in front of the goalkeeper, that's also really important. And in a team like United's, where in theory you'd expect to dominate the ball against most teams, you need a goalkeeper that is not going to drop clangers, and that is probably more important than producing the occasional brilliant reaction save. And De Gea is also doing a lot less of that now than he used to. And I think what's happened with De Gea, and I feel sorry for him in some aspects, is that he's wasted the best years of his career at United. He should have left several years ago. And what happened is he didn't. And for whatever reason, the fax machine, he decided to stay. But he went stale. And once you go stale, it's really hard to get your level back up. So he'll still make the occasional great save because he hasn't gone from being a brilliant goalkeeper to being a useless goalkeeper. He's now a dodgy keeper who can sometimes do good stuff. He's Bruce Grobbelaar or that Jerzy Dudek or that kind of goalkeeper. And that kind of goalkeeper is not the kind of goalkeeper that good teams generally have. It worked for Bruce Grobbelaar because he just played in the best team around. But United aren't the best team around. And they're relying on their goalkeeper to not just produce the occasional brilliant save when the ball gets through to him, but to actually be a presence and to be something important in improving the level of the team. And as I said, I don't know to what level Dean Henderson can do that, but I think that he would have come and caught that cross the other day.
3 one-word answers, Daniel, to wrap. Does De Gea start?
No.
Wow. Does Pogba start?
No.
And United or City?
I don't know if you're asking me who's going to win. So if you're asking me United City question, the answer's always going to be United.
Who's going to win?
United, obviously. No, I've no idea. I think it might be a draw.
It's going to be the draw, isn't it? It has to be. Daniel, thanks a million.